Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel, and boy do we got a video for you. This game called Payday 3 came out on the 21st, and boy was it a launch. So in this video I want to kind of give my opinions on the launch and kind of the state of modern AAA and AA gaming, and I want to look at some of the responses that people had on social media to this really disastrous launch. Now, I want to first start by saying I'm not the biggest fan of Payday. Now, I have hours and hours on Payday 2, and I have 40 hours. But whenever Payday 3 was announced, I didn't really bat an eye at it. I was kind of interested. I thought eventually I would get it on sale and have a good time with it with my friends, but I wasn't going out of my way to build up hype about this game. But I had a friend reach out and message me asking if I wanted to try out Payday on release day. And so I went ahead and purchased the game. The 21st rolled around and I downloaded the game. Got home from work and hopped onto the game with my friend. And that's whenever things really took a turn. We logged in, I completed the tutorial, got in a lobby, and then started matchmaking. And we kept matchmaking, and we kept matchmaking for 2 whole hours. Now, at first, I thought we were doing something wrong. I thought that there was some setting you had to turn on or something. We were just trying to play just the two of us, just in a local game. But after a while, we hopped onto X, formerly known as Twitter, to see what was happening. And we saw these tweets from Payday 3, talking about how they were experiencing server problems and server outages, etc, etc, etc. And for 3.5 days, Payday 3 was inaccessible to tens of thousands of players who purchased the game, including me. I was not able to get into a solo game until Saturday evening. Now you might be asking, why were you unable to get into a solo game? Was the game just not working? Was it not launching? No, it was launching and you could log in, but there was a problem. Payday 3 is an always online game, meaning that you always have to have an internet connection. And it goes a step further, forcing every single player, no matter if you're playing in a group of 4 or you're playing by yourself, you have to matchmake and join a server. That means that even if you're playing solo with 3 other AI, you can't just locally play it on your computer. You have to connect to a server and play it on the server. Now, there's a ton of problems with that, which I'll get into here in a minute, but that was the state of the game. And look, this video isn't going to be breaking down Payday 3. I actually like the game pretty well. I think the gameplay loop is fun. I think the shooting mechanics are fun. I think the core game is fun. I more have an issue with how the launch was handled and the subsequent response to that launch. Now, I was curious, so I started trying to do some research to find out why this game was online only. I mean, Payday 2 came out over 10 years ago, and it had both a local and an online option. You could do either that you wanted. And it was a relatively mixed bag for why this game was actually online only. A lot of people were saying that the developers had claimed that since it was on Unreal Engine 5, that required that the game be online only. And if that's the future of gaming, man, I've got some major problems with it. Now, some other people were saying that the online only feature was there because they wanted to allow for cross account progression. So for instance, if you bought the game on PC and you played it for a while and you had your account going and everything, then let's say you got an Xbox and you wanted to start playing it on Xbox. Well, if you went to Xbox, you could log into your same account and you could carry over all of your stats. Sounds fine. But I'm not really sure why that would require you to be online only if you're playing a local game with just you. It doesn't really make any sense. I mean, you should do something like Call of Duty. You guys play Call of Duty, right? And it says fetching online profile. Well, instead of being always online, you can have the option to play offline, but any progression that you make whenever you log back online would have to be sent to the server to update. Or maybe you can have separate progression for either. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways around this online only issue. But I I digress. I'm not going to suggest what these developers should do, although I think online only is a completely dumb, asinine feature. But the response to this game's launch was about what everyone expected. People all across social media, whether it was on Steam, whether it was on Twitter, X, whether it was on, I'm sure, a plethora of other social medias, everyone was upset, and rightfully so. They should be upset. And I'm glad that people were upset because this is a big deal. I mean, this game wasn't just unplayable, it was not accessible for the vast majority of people for 3.5 days after it was released. And that opening time is incredibly important for games. That is your first impression. I mean, you guys remember the game Battlefield 2042? Probably not. A lot of people don't even know that that game exists. Why? Because it had such a crappy launch that it got absolutely dislike bombed. It was horrible. Now, granted, a lot of those issues have been solved and the game is at least decent now. It's no Battlefield 4, but it's at least decent now. But that doesn't matter because everyone has already had their first impressions. Everyone has already decided that the game is bad because it was so god-awful at launch. But after going through a lot of the responses to their continual updates on Twitter, I saw so many people coming to the defense of these devs, and I really wanted to harp on that a little bit because it's it's unexcusable, frankly. Now, I want to start by saying I understand how hard software development is. I understand how hard game development is. I get it. It's a difficult thing to do. And I understand that there was a miscalculation with the servers, right? I understand that. I'm not trying to be aggressive towards the developers or try to just unwarrantedly criticize them. But I think that we should criticize them because if we allow these people to get away with this, whether it's the development team or the publishers or the execs at the company, the more that we allow them to continue to get away with it, the more that they're going to do it. Now, I saw a fair bit of people saying that these comment sections were really toxic, right? There were a lot of toxic responses, and I'll admit, social media has a lot of toxicity, and in AAA and AA games, there is a lot of toxicity whenever things don't go right. Even whenever things work as expected, there's a lot of toxicity. And yeah, that's a problem. But in this case, it is very, very warranted. I don't think that it's toxic to express your criticism and concern with a game that you spent money on to play and that is unavailable for 3 days. So I think we really need to break down and look at what is toxic and what is just criticism. One of the funniest things that I saw was frequently people would say, stop replying to the devs, they'll fix it when they fix it. And that just, it honestly made me laugh. First of all, at companies like this, large development studios or mid-sized development studios such as Starbreeze, the developers aren't taking time out of their days to respond to people on social media. They're not taking time to go onto the company's social media and put updates, all right? That's more than likely, I don't know for sure, but I would assume it's more than likely a social media or just general media management team. It's not the actual developers, okay? So don't think that the developers are taking time away from fixing the servers to respond to people on Twitter. It's just not happening. And a lot of people were saying that bitching about it and crying about it on Twitter or X wasn't going to make it magically fix itself. It wasn't going to make anything better. And I take great issue with that because whenever something like this happens, you should have pushback. There should be a negative reaction, okay? I'm not trying to get all conspiratorial, but if a game company can put out a game and it go horribly on launch and be broken to the point where it's not even playable for several days, well, a couple days, right? 3.5 days after launch. And we're not allowed to criticize it. We're not allowed to put negative reviews. We're not allowed to refund. We're not allowed to do anything. I think that the companies will just continue doing it. There'll be less of an incentive to make sure that they get it right the first time because there'll be so much backlash. And that is permanent. I mean, the reviews on Steam are going to be relatively permanent. And I think that that's a good thing. I want the developers to be, I don't want them to be afraid of making a bad product, but I want to make sure that they understand the ramifications of making a bad product so that they can work as hard as they can to make it a good product. And I understand a lot of this doesn't lie on the developers. It's more than likely a business decision made by business people, not necessarily the people actually writing the code and making the assets, right? But having this outcry on Twitter or on social media in general, I think is a really good thing, because it really allows the community to come together, to give feedback, to show the dissatisfaction to the company, to the people who are making the decisions. Don't try and simp for these companies. Don't try and like defend these companies whenever they mess up because you don't want to offend them, or you don't want to make them upset, or you think it's not productive. Trust me, it is very, very productive to have this outcry on social media around the game. It is very productive to have a bunch of negative reviews on your game because it's not functional in the first 3 days of launch. Another thing I saw quite a bit was actually people saying, this isn't a problem with the game, it's just a problem with the servers. Yeah, that's what everyone is complaining about. People can't even get into the game to experience the gameplay because the servers are down. The servers aren't working. People aren't criticizing the gameplay, right? People aren't criticizing that, especially in these first couple of days, right, on X or Twitter. I still don't know really what to call it. I don't know if I should call it X or Twitter. I don't know. Anyways, on Twitter, people weren't complaining about the game being bad or not fun or repetitive or anything like that. People were complaining because they couldn't access the game because the servers were down, because it was always online. And that brings me into my last point that I want to kind of address, right? I saw a ton of people on Twitter who were saying online only is the future. And I think that they're mostly right, but they're saying that if they're playing on a PC, if they're playing on a console, chances are they have internet anyways. That is what everyone is saying. People call us boomers whenever we want an offline mode for a video game, and that everyone always has access to the internet, right? People were saying, I don't care if it's online only because I have access to the internet on my PC. Just have access to the internet. And oh boy, it really pisses me off. First of all, the problem isn't that you have access to the internet on your PC. I had access to the internet on my PC when I was trying to play Payday 3. So did just about everyone else. The issue wasn't that people couldn't play it because they didn't have internet access. The issue was people couldn't play it because your servers got overwhelmed because it always has to be online. Whenever your servers go down, that means that people can't access your service. It's very simple. It's not about your computer having internet connection. It's about the servers the game has to run on. And that's the biggest problem with always online games. You have to have an internet connection and the servers have to be up and running. So anytime that there's downtime, whether it's maintenance, whether it's some sort of DDoS attack, right? Like Apex Legends, whenever you have those situations, you cannot access the game at all. And that item that you spent money on and that you could continue to spend money on with microtransactions for cosmetic items, you won't be able to actually access. And that's the most frustrating part, because Payday 2, 10 plus years ago, had an offline mode. So if you happen to lose internet connection, or if the servers for crime.net happen to go down, you could just play locally with yourself. And a big issue with always online for people who are playing this game solo is you have to matchmake into a server to play by yourself with AI. You cannot play it locally, which means people were actually reporting that in their solo player games, they were experiencing incredible amounts of server lag. They were lagging in a single player experience, not frame dropping. They were lagging. And I'm glad that people always are online. I mean, I guess that's a good thing that the majority of people, have internet, but people's internet is wildly different. I mean, it just is. Like, say you're a student and you're living in a dorm, or you're at an apartment complex that requires you to use their built-in Wi-Fi. That Wi-Fi might not be good. And so you might go online and see that there's a new Payday game out and it says single player on it. So you go ahead and you buy Payday 3, you launch it, you get into the game, you get into a solo player game, just playing by yourself, and you can't even play it because you're lagging too hard because you have to connect to a server to be able to play it. I mean, not everyone has the same internet connection, not everyone has the same access. That's the big problem with online only games. It really severely limits the accessibility of the game. Just like what we're having now, where the accessibility of the game was limited because of the servers being down, right? Because the servers can't handle the load. Whether or not that gets fixed, your accessibility goes way down because now you have to rely on these servers. People have to rely on their internet connections, which could be unstable at times. It's just a whole big mess. And you know what? Riddle me this. What happens in 5, 10, 15 years whenever Starbreeze decides that it's not worth having dedicated servers up anymore, right? I mean, Payday 2 is 10 plus years old. I mean, it's an old game. What happens whenever Payday 3 gets that old? Are they going to have these dedicated servers still up and running? That's another big problem with online-only games, is that after you cross the lifespan of the game that the company has decided, you kind of just lose access to the game. You can't play it anymore. You purchase this product, you should be able to play it for your lifetime. And I'm not saying necessarily that, I'm not saying that companies need to maintain a live service game. I have my issues with that. And I'm also not saying that companies need to always host these dedicated servers so that players can always play multiplayer. That's not what I'm saying either. But whenever the servers go down, the dedicated servers go down for Payday 2, or whenever the dedicated servers go down for Payday 3, you're not going to be able to play the game at all. If there was an offline mode, you would be able to come back to that game in 10, 15 years, even after the servers have gone down, and you'd still be able to at least play it locally. So in conclusion, guys, please, please, please stop simping for these companies. Please stop excusing their behavior. Starbreeze should have sat down. They should have had an open beta or something on one weekend so that they could test out their servers before launch. This should have been easily preventable. Especially, you should put infinitely more care into your servers, especially whenever your game is going to be an online only service. And to all the people who are out there saying it's fine if it's online only because you have an internet connection or because that's the way of the future, just for a second, just think about what happened over these past few days with Payday 3.